Victoria's Bass Coast, from Phillip Island to Inverloch, is renowned for its beaches and dunes, cliff faces and rock platforms, estuaries and rural landscapes. The coastline at Inverloch is one of the jewels dotted along the Bass Coast, highly valued for its vegetated dunes that provide a natural backdrop to the surf beach.
So ask me what you know.
The town's resident population of about 6,000 swells to a seasonal peak of up to 2 to 3 times that number as holidaymakers arrive in droves to enjoy swimming, walking, surfing, boating and nature appreciation at the surf beach and in Anderson Inlet. At least that was the case until 2013, when the surf beach began to lower and its backshore dunes recede rapidly. In the space of just 7 years, to the end of 2019, the dunes have receded by about 50 metres and the gently sloping beach has dropped by several metres, leaving a steep scarp that is perilously close to the surf club and within metres of the coast road. The implications of these rapid changes prompted action by the South Gippsland Conservation Society.
By mid to late 2018, around 40 metres of dunes behind the surf beach had been removed since 2013, and with no signs of recovery, the South Gippsland Conservation Society initiated the Inverloch Coastal Resilience Project to analyse and raise awareness of what was happening and to highlight the environmental, social and economic values under threat. We did this by reviewing historical aerial photography and previous reports, by collaborating with experts in ecology, coastal geomorphology, Aboriginal cultural heritage and economics and tourism, and by undertaking an extensive stakeholder consultation program which culminated with the public exhibition that we mounted in Inverloch and Monthaggi between March and June 2019.
The review revealed that while the Inverloch coast is naturally dynamic and there have been periods of coastline recession in the past, dune loss was previously followed by recovery, with the status quo restored under favourable conditions. An example is the section of coast between the Ozone Street track and Point Norman, east of the surf club.
We're at the Ozone Street access track, where significant erosion occurred in the late 70s, but where recovery of the dunes and the dune vegetation occurred within around 10 years. From this point out to the sea, where the sea is now around 30 metres away. What's different about the current erosion sequence is that it's occurred so rapidly over the full length of the surf beach and with such a mass relocation of sand into the inlet where it is unavailable for surf beach replenishment.
The analysis detailed the rapid recession that began in 2013 and that has continued through to the end of 2019. This aerial view shows the wide vegetated dune system and beach in front of the surf club in 2006. The aerial view in 2013 was fairly similar. By December 2018, around half of the width of the dunes had been removed and only a narrow beach remained. The surf club was now sitting immediately behind a steep, sandy scarp. Dune recession accelerated during 2019 after continual storm surges hit the coast from March to October.
I've been coming to Inverloch for the last 30 plus years and I now live in Inverloch, and I've seen a lot of coastal erosion occurring over the years, and it comes and goes, but the last 4 or 5 years have seen significant erosion with up to 45 to 50 metres of erosion.
Brian Martin from Parks Victoria is a local resident who has lived here for 38 years.
A week or so after we installed the first wet fences, we got hit by quite a nasty storm with big seas and strong winds behind it. It was pretty amazing seeing so much foreshore being eroded and trees just falling into the water and floating off into the distance. It was quite an amazing sight.
The video footage shows the storm waves crashing into the two trial sections of wet sand fencing installed to protect the surf club and Bunurong Road in March 2019. The fences are designed to decrease the energy of storm waves, allowing sand to accumulate behind the fence. However, both fences suffered significant damage within 1 month of their erection, limiting their effectiveness over the 2019 storm season. A single row of a sturdier version of the fences was installed at both sites in October 2019. Since 2013, the Surf Club's lookout tower has been threatened with collapse as the underlying sand washed away, and it was moved to several new locations and eventually rebuilt with runners so it could be towed to higher ground. In January 2020, a new, purpose-built surf rescue trailer was in use at the surf beach. The dunes had been further eroded by storm activity in late 2019 to expose the clubhouse itself when viewed from the beach.
The changes that have occurred at Inverloch Surf Beach since 2013, with an average rate of coastline recession of 7 metres per year, represent one of the most rapid changes on the Victorian coastline in European historical times and are rated as severe to extreme by global comparison. The combination of more frequent and intense southwesterly storm surges breaking obliquely to the shoreline, as well as rising sea levels, dropping of the beach level and removal of sediment supply, means that the beach and the dunes may not recover as they have in the past, and without intervention will likely lead to the complete removal of the surf beach dune system.
The erosion cycle is far more destructive than the rest of that process, which is the build-up of beaches during the summer. So it's the speed of change. So all of this has happened within a very short time frame. And the other thing we know is that sea levels are rising. It's 2 millimetres a year, thereabouts. But you build that year upon year, and you add to that a high tide, you add to that a storm event, and we see a single event can cause a great deal of erosion.
More frequent storm surges and rising sea levels are consistent with the predicted impacts of climate change, and the changes that we're seeing today are likely to become more pronounced as our climate continues to warm.
The global trend of increasing wind speeds with climate change may also result in changes to how storm surge waves interact with the coast.
A slight change in the direction, for example, or an increase in the energy, and the incidence of waves along this coast changing, then that would accelerate the loss of sand from this beach and its movement towards the inlet. And where it goes from there, some of it has gone into the inlet and some of it may well have gone offshore, and it's unlikely to come back here because this is not the transport direction. Sand doesn't move from the inlet back along here. It moves from here to the inlet, and it then gets stored in the inlet for various periods of time, and some of it will finish up at Point Smythe and then south towards the southern end of Venus Bay and Cape Liptrap.
Previously, when the sea level rose, typically during storms and storm surges, sand would be removed from the foredunes and deposited out to sea, raising the sea floor. As the sea level returned to normal, that process was reversed, with sand being returned to the dunes, replenishing them and returning the seafloor to its lower pre-storm level. In the past few seasons, it seems that severe storms have removed sand from the dunes as before, but under the powerful influence of strong southwesterly and west-southwesterly winds and currents, have transported that sand eastwards into Anderson Inlet. With less available sand, the dune recession was not restored when calmer weather returned. The lowering of the beach level at Inverloch has been another factor that has contributed to the coastline recession.
If the beach is lower, then it means that the distance between low and high tide is narrower. You've got to think that one through, but that does happen, which means you have more wave energy concentrated towards the back shore because you've got less horizontal intertidal space. And that could be a factor in explaining the rapid backshore recession of the last 10 years. And so I'd say there is clearly a temporal coincidence between the recession of the back shore and the lowering of this beach profile.
A second consequence was that some objects that had long been buried beneath the sand were uncovered. In early 2019, after a battering by strong wave surges, timber structures were revealed near flat rocks as the beach level dropped. These structures turned out to be part of the wreck of the three-masted bark, the Amazon, which had run aground in 1869 and which had not been accessible for decades. Beach level lowering in late 2019 has also exposed the reef at Point Norman, which has been covered by sand for at least 15 years. As well as documenting the recession of the surf beach, our review of aerial photography showed that in 2010 there was a wide sandy spit at Point Norman, with the main channel from the ocean into Anderson Inlet located immediately east, hard up against a narrow foreshore. By December 2018, the narrow main channel had been filled in by sand shifted from the surf beach to form a wide sandy barrier with an enclosed lagoon, with the channel shifted east towards Point Smythe. The mechanism by which this has occurred appears to be related to changes in the way that what's called a hydraulic groin operated at Point Norman. In coastal engineering, a physical barrier called a groin is sometimes used to protect a beach from erosion. One or a series of timber, concrete or rock groins are built at right angles to the beach. These trap sand moving along the shoreline and reduce its removal by wind and wave action. A similar effect can result from a strong tidal current that blocks the movement of sand along the shoreline, thereby acting as a hydraulic groin.
The hydraulic groin, the concept of that is that on the ebb tide you get a stream of water coming out, and if that coincides with waves that are moving sand along the shore, then that sand will be moved offshore and it'll be removed from the beach system. Conversely, on the flood tide, then the hydraulic groin works in fact as a transport system, and any sand that's coming along the beach independent of the tide by wave action will then be moved into the inlet, and possibly if the flood tide energy at that point is greater than the ebb tide energy, then the sand will be deposited and left there.
When the main channel was located close to the shoreline, sand from the surf beach accumulated in a large spit off Point Norman due to this blocking effect of tidal currents moving into and out of Anderson Inlet. The movement of the main channel means that the hydraulic groin no longer operates off Point Norman. This has resulted in more and more sand being deflected into the inlet under the influence of powerful southwest waves. Another significant element of the study was analysis of the ecological, geomorphological, social and economic values that are under threat from the sustained coastline recession. The loss of half of the vegetated dunes since 2013 has important ecological consequences. The area is rich in native flora and fauna, many of which are rare or threatened. The coastline recession at Flat Rocks has resulted in significant depletion of the mature coast Banksia woodland, estimated to have been between 60 and 80 years old. The vegetated dunes are also an important corridor for wildlife movement along the coast, being one of the few east-west biolinks within Bass Coast Shire. In addition, the now removed foredunes provided important habitat for vulnerable shorebird species such as the hooded plover.
I think the dune ecology is critical for the local biodiversity. There's so much clearing to the north of Inverloch, and it provides a very valuable corridor for fauna in an east-west direction, and it's one of the few east-west biolink corridors in this whole area. I was surprised at the range of flora species that were present. And also there are up to 8 ecological vegetation classes, which is different types of vegetation communities along the whole dune system. This is one of the most significant patches of the vegetation community, Coast Banksia woodland, along the Inverloch foreshore. It has been quite stable from the 1970s through to about 6 years ago when erosion started. During the past 6 years, quite a number of the old growth Banksias, as the Dune has eroded further inland. The old growth coast banksias are just toppling onto the beach and being lost. There are only a few old growth trees left along this whole section of coastline now. One of the aims of this project is to try and stabilise the dune system, especially at the rear of the dune, by supplementary planting with coast banksias and other relevant shrubs as an experiment to see if it makes the dune more stable and resilient.
Neville Rosengren explains the geomorphological values present in the Inverloch coastline.
At Inverloch, you've got all of those preserved in the space of a few square kilometres. So we can transit from an active cliff coast, shore platform, to a fossil cliff coast, a bluff, with a shore platform buried by sand dunes. And the ages of those dunes get progressively younger as you go from the stranded cliff out to the modern dune. And so you've got those several episodes superimposed one on another. And despite the disturbance that there's been by built structures and roads and other things here, you can still pick that up in the landscape. So it's a great teaching site.
The Inverloch coastline records the history of coastal landform evolution over more than 10,000 years. Since 2013, a substantial part of that record has been lost, with over 50% of the dunes removed. Culturally, the potential loss of at least 14 Aboriginal sites in or adjacent to the study area, some 6,000 to 7,000 years of age, would be highly significant to the Bunurong and Gunai-Kurnai Aboriginal corporations.
What a beautiful place. Why wouldn't you want to camp here and get food here? There's wetlands, there's eels in the river, there's pipi on the beach, there's, as you said before, the plants. So it's a very rich area. Basically, they're all quite the usual things you see along the coast. You would expect to find middens, but these seem to be quite rare, and they may have been on the fore dunes, and that what we're seeing now is where the erosion's taken away the fore dunes. Sites we found so far haven't been found during really very systematic surveys.
Cultural significance, it is an asset, it's a cultural asset, whether they're artefacts, whether they're middens.
So you've got encroaching development from the north, and from the south you've got the issue of rising sea levels.
Remaining sites represent a diminishing resource, with many sites beyond the coastal reserve having already been destroyed with urban development, and sites older than 7,000 years already submerged beneath the sea. It's likely that more as yet unknown Aboriginal places are at risk, as the area has not been systematically surveyed. Funding for a cultural heritage survey is required to locate those other at-risk sites and to develop an appropriate management program.
The social and economic values of Inverloch Surf Beach and its dunes have been highlighted in David Cottrell's Economics and Tourism Assessment and in responses we received to our community survey. The survey revealed that going to the beach was the most popular recreation activity in Inverloch, and that 97% of respondents rated the natural setting provided by the dunes as either moderately or significantly important to their experience.
Beautiful part of the world, obviously. Even just walking through those little trails to get to the beach, it's natural habitat, and it's obviously a natural feature of this part of the world. You need that little buffer from where the houses and the street is through to the beach. It's what makes this part of the world so beautiful and the way it is. So yeah, obviously it'd be a shame to see that go, of course.
Yeah, aesthetically it's going to be devalued for sure, because on the low tides, nothing better than being out on the sandbar, looking back and just seeing vegetation. If we lose it, it'll be sad. It'll be a very sad day when if it all went.
The survey also revealed that recreation impacts are already occurring, with 82% of survey respondents affected by the condition of the beach over the 2018-19 summer. Recreation impacts include very little or no dry sand at high tide, the safety risk for children playing on or near the steep dune scarp, and reduced access points due to the closure of several beach tracks. Changes in the quality of the beach experience and loss of the dunes potentially threatens regional income and jobs. This translates to a potential economic loss of from $3 to $5 million per year. Shane Hogan, owner of the offshore surf school, explains how the coastline changes are affecting his business.
The beach has changed so much, like it used to get gradually deeper as you go out to sea. Now it's like the ocean, it's dropped, the base of it's dropped, and on the high tide, it's basically really deep and the waves don't spill in, so it's really hard to run lessons on the high tide with kids because kids are moving, it's up to their armpits, rather than when it used to get gradually deeper on the high tide, they could sort of do lessons and they'd only be coming up, we could do lessons only coming up to waist. So it's just, the whole beach it's just harder to work on and do lessons. We actually do a lot of things in the car park. If it's like a high tide, because there's big swell, not a lot of beach, we actually have to jump to feed and teach the kids how to jump up in the car park, then come down the beach and get straight in the water because there's not as much sand for us to actually do it on the beach.
Shane also notes that Waratah Bay, Walkerville and Sandy Point are being affected far less than Inverloch.
There is erosion there, but for some reason, they are still a lot easier to use. Their beach is nothing like here. People may choose to go to other spots.
To increase the resilience of the dunes, I think you need to undertake several actions. You need to control pest animals, weeds in particular in the dune system, and once spraying of the weeds is taken out, and then supplementary plant where necessary in the dune system to keep up the resilience. Also monitor tracks through the dunes, make sure that they aren't being eroded through pedestrian access.
Other recommended short-term measures to maintain and enhance dune resilience include no further removal of vegetation from the dune system, thatching of steep dune slopes, revegetation of fore dunes with hairy spinifex grass and other suitable indigenous plants, introduction of more effective management and education of beach users to avoid dune trampling, and rationalising of beach access tracks. Ongoing project activities include regular liaison with the interagency Inverloch Coastal Protection Working Group, coastal researchers and modellers at Melbourne, Deakin and Griffith Universities, investigation of coastline protection strategy options, and regular beach profile monitoring by our team of volunteers using both drone and laser level recording techniques. With the beach profile monitoring, the team of volunteers has been trained to operate drones under the Victorian Coastal Monitoring Program and also to do supplementary laser level surveys. Surveys are undertaken every few weeks to record changes that are occurring in the position of the dunes and in the beach level along the length of the surf beach and in Anderson Inlet. Since the monitoring commenced in August 2018, the results have indicated that more than 100,000 cubic metres of sand has been moved from the surf beach, with the biggest loss occurring in the Point Norman area. The dunes have receded between 6 and 12 metres between the Surf Club and the Ozone Street track, while at Point Norman, a retreat of over 55 metres has been recorded. The level of the beach has also dropped between 25 centimetres and 1 metre over the same period. These monitoring results confirm that significant changes are continuing to occur at Inverloch Surf Beach and will provide important input into the local coastal hazard assessment.
Certainly the monitoring post is a very important one. We've got all this erosion occurring, so we really do need to monitor exactly what's happening and hopefully feed that into any further works that are done around trying to control what's happening around the Inverloch area.
The results of the 12-month investigation and community and stakeholder consultation research were presented in a detailed report at a launch at the Inverloch Surf Club on the 2nd of August 2019. The project report was extremely well received.
On behalf of all the agencies, I think I just really want to congratulate the South Gippsland Conservation Society and all the individuals and groups that have been part of this project.
To get such a substantial piece of evidence-based advice to decision makers done via the community, that is incredible. Not only is it deeply evidence-based and community driven, But you brought along all of the decision makers in a way that they are now in the tent. And that is a fantastic thing, because all of those decision makers need to have both the evidence and the community for decisions. So honestly, well done.
Since the launch, the South Gippsland Conservation Society has welcomed the announcement by the Victorian Government of $1.15 million funding for emergency works to protect the Surf Lifesaving Club, and for a regional and strategic partnership, a multi-agency group, to develop a local coastal hazard assessment for the whole of the Inverloch coast, including Anderson Inlet, as well as further resilience planning with the community. Undertaking a local coastal hazard assessment as a means of developing a long-term coastal adaptation strategy for Inverloch was a key recommendation of our project report. The project report also made suggestions for the scope of the assessment, including the need to further analyse the complex relationships between coastal processes, the position of the main channel, and tidal movements into and out of Anderson Inlet. The Society is also encouraged by Bass MP Jordan Crognali's statement that a long-term strategic approach must be taken to protect the social, environmental and economic values of our coastline and foreshores.
Jordan Crognali's statement supports one of the key findings of our project, namely that future planning for the coast should consider the ecological and social values of the coastline, in our case the vegetated dune system, not only potentially affected infrastructure.
A similar directive is contained in the recently released Victorian Marine and Coastal Policy, which requires that decision makers protect and enhance the ecological values of ecosystems and habitats in the marine and coastal environment. The South Gippsland Conservation Society understands that the project report will be used as a reference document for the local coastal hazard assessment, so they look forward to discussing their study findings and recommendations with the regional and strategic partnership during that process. They were also pleased to see the additional efforts that Bass Coast Shire made over the last summer to protect the dunes from trampling, as well as the signs that were erected highlighting the need to protect the ecological values of the dunes. In terms of significant remedial works, the focus has continued to be on infrastructure protection, as well as 2 versions of wet sand fencing and dune renourishment at the Surf Club and at the Bunurong Road sites. A sand-filled geotextile container wall has been installed in early 2020 as an emergency measure to protect the Surf Club building. In addition, a rock wall has been placed at the Bunurong Road site after multiple storm surges in March and April 2020 threatened the road itself. These works still leave the rest of the surf beach unprotected.
A short-term beach protection plan involving regular dune renourishment over the 2020 winter season will be critical to provide a degree of protection for the remaining dunes beyond the Surf Club until a decision is taken on whether to extend the wet sand fences in late 2020.
Following the storm damage that occurred to the first version of the wet sand fences, the second, much sturdier version, installed in October 2019, has resulted in substantial sand accretion at the Surf Club and Bunurong Road sites over the 2019-20 summer, with both fences almost completely covered by sand. Provided that the fences continue to prove effective over the 2020 storm season, the South Gippsland Conservation Society advocates extension of the wet sand fences following completion of the trial period in spring 2020. Consideration should be given to making the wet sand fences higher so they can provide more protection at the onset of the storm season each autumn. This would avoid the kind of damage that occurred at the Bunurong Road site during the April 2020 storm.
Regular dune renourishment and extension of the wet sand fences over a longer length of the surf beach represents the best short-term, low-cost approach to protecting the dunes, while a longer-term protection strategy is developed through the local coastal hazard assessment. Our economic study demonstrated that extension of the wet sand fences over the full length of the surf beach would cost less than the estimated annual cost to the local economy if the dunes were lost.
The highest priority sections for protection are at Flat Rocks, to protect the remaining Coast Banksia woodland community, and between the Surf Club and east of the Wave Street access track to protect the most significant remaining dunes, totalling around 1 kilometre. 1 kilometre of fencing would cost around the same as construction of the sand-filled geotextile container wall at the Surf Club. The South Gippsland Conservation Society has appreciated the support and encouragement provided by the Victorian Marine and Coastal Council, the Department of Environment, Lands, Water and Planning, Parks Victoria and the Bass Coast Shire, as well as other members of the Interagency Working Group. They look forward to working with the regional and strategic partnership in identifying the most effective suite of measures to maintain the ecological, social and economic values identified in the report, as well as a sustainable long-term adaptation strategy for this highly valued section of coastline.